These are not your usual fiction tales. They're about people vanishing mysteriously, getting possessed by demons, and even getting tangled up in devil worship. The Villisca Axe Murder. The Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa is a famous place that attracts people who like to look for ghosts and those who enjoy scary things. A long time ago, in 1912, something very bad happened there. Someone hurt and killed 6 kids and 2 grown-ups with an axe. And nobody ever figured out who did it. In 1994, someone bought the house, fixed it up to look like it did in 1912, and made it a place for people to visit. You can stay there for $428 a night. But be ready for strange things. People who go there often say they see a man with an axe walking around or hear kids screaming, even though there's nobody there. But in November of 2014, the haunting took a darker turn. Robert Stephen Lorson Jr., 37, of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, was one such visitor. He arrived with a group of friends for a recreational paranormal investigation, according to Montgomery County Sheriff Joe Sampson. From my understanding, he was alone in the northwest bedroom, and the rest of the party was outside, and he called for help on their mobile two-way radios. Sampson told me his companions found him stabbed in the chest. Lorson suffered the self-inflicted injury at about 12:45 a.m., which is around the same time the 1912 axe murders in the house began, and Lorson was brought to a nearby hospital before being helicoptered to Creighton University Medical Center in Omaha. Lorson recovered from his injuries, but has never spoken publicly about what occurred that day. For Martha Lynn, the owner of the home, the incident was very upsetting. It's publicity, but it's not exactly the kind of publicity you desire to have. I don't want people thinking that when they come to the Villisca Axe Murder House something's going to happen that's going to make them do something like that. The house remains open for tourist visits and overnight stays today. The Haunted Doll. When you imagine haunted dolls, you might picture those eerie old-fashioned porcelain ones, right? Most likely, you don't have any of those lying around. However, don't relax too quickly when it comes to children's toys. There was a Disney's Frozen Elsa doll given as a Christmas gift in 2013 in the Houston area, and it made the news recently because it appeared to become haunted. The doll used to say lines from the Frozen movie and sing "Let It Go" when you pressed a button on its necklace. For 2 years, it only spoke in English, explained Emily Madonia, the mother. But in 2015, it began switching between Spanish and English on its own. There wasn't any button that could do that. It just happened randomly. The family has had the doll for over 6 years, and they've never replaced its batteries. Emily added that the doll would start talking and singing out of the blue, even when they had switched it off. In December 2019, the family made a choice to get rid of the spooky doll. But a few weeks later, to their surprise, they discovered it tucked away inside a bench in their living room. Emily Madonia explained. The kids were adamant that they didn't place it there, and I trusted them because they wouldn't have gone through the trash outside. At that point, Elsa ceased to sing the English rendition of "Let It Go" altogether, speaking only Spanish when pressed. The family then double-bagged the bizarre doll and placed it at the bottom of their garbage, which was taken out on garbage day. They went on a trip shortly after, but when they returned, Elsa too had come back and was waiting in the backyard of their home. This time, the family mailed Elsa to a family friend in Minnesota. who taped the haunted doll to the front bumper of his truck. It doesn't seem to have made its way back to Houston yet, as per Madonia's latest February Facebook update on the creepy doll. The Deadly Exorcism. In August 2016, up in North London, there was a 26-year-old guy named Kennedy Ive. He started acting really odd and aggressive after he felt pain in his throat. It got pretty intense. He even bit his own dad and said some really strange things, like he wanted to cut off his own private parts. He also kept talking about feeling like there was a python or snake inside him. His family got really worried, so they had to tie him to a bed with cable ties and use a lot of force to keep him still. As the BBC reported, the family then set about attempting to cure Kennedy through restraint and prayer over the next 3 days, the court was told. His brother, Colin Ive, told police, "It's clear that thing was in him. What we believed was a demon because it was not natural. It was clearly trying to kill him." He said, "We had to restrain him for himself. It was clear if we didn't restrain him, he could have tried to harm people in our family." Kennedy Ive had been bound to his bed for 3 days without medical attention when his brother called emergency services, explaining that Kennedy Ive was complaining of dehydration. He appeared to have developed breathing issues and was pronounced dead at 10:17 a.m., as The Independent reported. While police were at the house, Colin Ive allegedly carried out an attempted resurrection by chanting and praying for Mr. Ive. All 7 members of Kennedy Ive's family were charged with manslaughter, false imprisonment, and causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. During a post-mortem examination, more than 60 wounds were discovered on Kennedy Ive's body, including a potential bite mark. Additionally, his father, Kenneth Ive, and 4 of his brothers also suffered injuries during the incident. The BBC reported. Kenneth Ive told jurors he ordered his sons to take shifts and use overwhelming force, but denied that an association with cults, occults and secret societies played any part in the death. After a 4-day jury deliberation, all 7 family members were cleared of charges on March 14, 2019. Dead animals in the walls. In 2015, when the Bretsuis family in Auburn, Pennsylvania, decided to insulate their home, they made a rather unsettling discovery. It had already been insulated, but with numerous dead animal carcasses. The dead animals were wrapped in newspapers from the 1930s and 40s and were among half-used spices and other items. After removing the items, they sent hundreds of artifacts and carcasses to an expert in Kutztown. The specialist believed that the decaying animals found inside their walls were connected to powwow or Dutch magic. This ritual had its origins in the Pennsylvania Dutch culture, practiced by German-speaking settlers who arrived in Pennsylvania during the 1600s and 1700s. These settlers were often followers of Lutheran, Mennonite, or Amish faiths. Powwow or Dutch magic was used for healing purposes and for seeking both physical and spiritual protection. Many of the spells deal with the care of livestock, finding water, or the treatment of minor ailments, reflecting the conditions and concerns of early American settlers. But powwow also has within it a tradition of darker spells, and even of such things as conjuring demons. Florida devil worshipping. In June of 2012, friends began to notice a change in the behavior of Danielle Harkins, a 35-year-old schoolteacher near St. Petersburg, Florida. She started showing an unusual interest in demonic rituals. Shortly thereafter, she was arrested for the abuse of 7 of her former students. Danielle Harkins told the kids they needed to rid their bodies of demons. As the group gathered before dusk Saturday around a small fire near the St. Petersburg Pier, they should cut their skin to let the evil spirits out. Police said she told the children Then, they needed to burn the wounds to ensure that those spirits would not return. When Harkins held a lighter to one teen's hand, wind blew the flame out, police said. That prompted her to douse his hand in perfume before setting it on fire. The boy suffered second-degree burns, police said. Another teen was cut on the neck with a broken bottle, police said. Harkins used a flame to heat a small key, which she then used to cauterize the wound. The police became involved because a friend of one of the students who took part in the ritual became concerned and alerted them. Surprisingly, none of the students themselves had informed their parents about the incident, nor did they provide any comments. After Harkins was arrested on charges of aggravated battery and child abuse, investigators have communicated with Harkins, but she did not clarify the specific religious beliefs or reasons behind her actions. Detective Pewitz of the St. Petersburg Police Department stated, "She hasn't told us precisely what her intentions were with all of this." An exorcism in Indianapolis. In the past year, the Indianapolis Star published a detailed report about a family's harrowing ordeal with 3 children they believed to be possessed by demons. The account of LaToya Ammons and her family contains unsettling stories of children appearing to climb walls, being hurled across rooms, and using unnatural voices to threaten doctors. It might sound like something out of a fictional movie or a fantasy, but all of these incidents were more or less confirmed through nearly 800 pages of official records obtained by the Indianapolis Star and recounted in more than a dozen interviews with police, DCS personnel, psychologists, family members, and a Catholic priest. One of the most disturbing parts of the report focuses on a 9-year-old child believed to be possessed. The child wore an bizarre grin and walked backward up a wall to the ceiling. Remarkably, he then somersaulted over Campbell, landing safely on his feet, all the while never letting go of his grandmother's hand. Another part of the story tells us that a 12-year-old girl later confided in mental health professionals. She described feeling as though someone was strangling her and keeping her pinned down, preventing her from speaking or moving. She recounted hearing a voice that told her she'd never reunite with her family and that she wouldn't live for another 20 minutes. The phone stalker. In 2007, news documented a series of cell phone calls to families with terrifyingly specific death threats. The unidentified callers knew exactly what families were doing and what they were wearing. These families are living in a nightmarish situation where they receive menacing calls at all hours, threatening harm to their children, pets, and grandparents. Voice messages arrive, playing back their private conversations, even one involving a local police detective. What's even more unnerving is that the caller seems to know intricate details about their lives, what they're wearing, their activities, and daily routines. Despite months of investigation, the police appear to be unable to stop them. This distressing ordeal persisted for the Kuykendall family for months. They reported receiving calls from someone with a scratchy voice who threatened to harm them. When the Faircrest, Washington police tried to trace these calls, they found that they were coming from the Kuykendall's own phones, even when those phones were turned off. But it didn't end there. The Kuykendalls and 2 other families in Faircrest suspect that the callers are using their cell phones to spy on them. They believe that these hackers are aware of every aspect of their lives, where they are, what they're doing, and what they're wearing. The death of Villisca Lamb. Villisca Lamb was last seen on January 31, 2013, in the lobby of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was vacationing through the West Coast, documenting the trip on her blog, and checking in with her parents every day. On January 31, those calls stopped. Lamb had vanished. Soon the police were involved and her parents arrived to help with the search. They had nothing. That February, LAPD released elevator surveillance footage of Lamb before her disappearance. The footage shows Lamb behaving strangely in the elevator, appearing to talk with invisible people, peering around the corner of the door, crouching in the corner, and opening and closing the door. But what exactly is going on in this video raises more questions than answers. Theories range from psychotic episodes, the demonic possession, to unknown assailants just out of the camera's view. Around that time, hotel guests started reported weird things happening with the Cecil Hotel water supply. The shower was awful, said Sabina Baugh, who spent 8 days there during the investigation. When you turned the tap on, the water was coming black first for 2 seconds, and then it was going back to normal. The tap water tasted horrible, Baugh said. It had a very funny, sweety, disgusting taste. It's a very strange taste. I can barely describe it. But for a week, they never complained. We never thought anything of it, she said. We thought it was just the way it was here. On the morning of February 19, the hotel staff member went up to the roof and used a ladder to check the water storage tanks of the hotel. It was there that authorities discovered the badly decomposed body of Lam, who was found without any clothing. Her personal belongings were located nearby. Following an autopsy, her death was officially determined to be accidental. The hotel's history is indeed quite unusual and filled with strange circumstances. The water tank itself had a metal latch that could be opened. But it's important to note that access to the roof was supposedly secured with an alarm and lock. This single-room occupancy hotel has a rather dark past. Notorious serial killer Richard Ramirez, often referred to as the Night Stalker, lived on the 14th floor for several months in 1985. He was later found guilty of 14 murders in the 1980s. Additionally, international serial killer Jack Unterweger is suspected of murdering 3 prostitutes during his stay at the hotel. In 1991, he eventually took his own life in jail in 1994. In 1962, the tragic incident occurred when a female resident jumped out of one of the hotel's windows. Sadly, she not only took her own life but also landed on a pedestrian below, resulting in the death of both individuals. In February 2021, a Netflix doc called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel explored Alyssa's tragic case and the history of the cursed Cecil Hotel. Utah murder-suicide. In September of 2014, a devastating discovery shook a Utah teenager to his core when he returned home to find his parents and 3 siblings dead. Inside a notebook, a peculiar to-do list had been scribbled on the pages. Strangely, the list resembled the preparations one might make before going on vacation, with tasks like feed the pets and find someone to watch after the house written down. While it initially appeared to be a murder-suicide, there were perplexing aspects to the case. No suicide note was found. There had been no prior indications that such a tragic event would occur, and there was no apparent explanation. The police were left bewildered, struggling to understand why 2 parents would take the lives of themselves and 3 out of their 4 children for an entire year. The fate of the family remained shrouded in mystery, leaving everyone wondering about the unthinkable events that had transpired. Then, in January, the police revealed more unsettling details about the case. Based on accounts from family members and an extensive police investigation, it was discovered that the parents had been compelled by the belief that the apocalypse was coming and an obsession with a convicted killer. Friends and family told police that the parents were worried about the evil in the world and wanted to escape a pending apocalypse. But most assumed they just wanted to move somewhere off the grid. Investigators also found letters written by Christy Strack to one of the state's most infamous convicted killers, Ann Lafferty, who was convicted in the 1984 fatal stabbing of his sister-in-law and her 1-year-old daughter. According to trial testimony, he killed the victims at the order of his brother Ron Lafferty, who claimed to have had a revelation from God. The story became a book called Under the Banner of Heaven. Police said Christy Strack became friends with Dan Lafferty, and she and her husband even visited him in prison. The Watcher. After moving into their $1.3 million dream home, the New Jersey family started receiving creepy death threats from someone who identified themselves as the Watcher. As CBS News reported earlier this year, since moving in, the owners said they have received numerous letters from the mysterious person. The Watcher claimed the home has been the subject of my family for decades, and I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Castro reported. The new owners have several children. And other letters asked, have they found out what's in the walls yet? And I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. The family was forced to flee from their home, and later took legal action against the people who sold them the house. Issei the Cannibal. In 1974, a 24-year-old student named Issei Sagawa from Waco University allegedly followed a German woman to her home in Tokyo, Japan. While she was sleeping, he broke into her apartment and tried to cut a piece of flesh from her body with the intention of eating it. She woke up, resisted him, and he was eventually apprehended by the police. A 2012 Vice documentary that delved into Issei's unusual story revealed that he was initially charged with attempted rape. However, his wealthy father ended up paying the victim a settlement to have the charges dropped outside of court. 7 years later, in 1981, he allegedly committed a gruesome murder in France. He shot and ate a fellow university student named René Hardevold. Shockingly, Issei documented this horrifying act with photographs. Authorities captured him once more while he was trying to dispose of the remaining parts of her body in the Bois de Boulogne lake. Following his arrest, he was deported back to Japan and confined to a mental institution. For reason unknown, his psychologists in Japan declared that he was sane. Furthermore, a legal technicality involving the French government refusing to turn over the documents from his case meant that his murder charges were dropped completely. He checked himself out of the mental hospital and has reportedly been walking the streets as a free man ever since. Issei has even become a controversial celebrity, writing over 20 books. According to Japan Today, he most recently fantasized about an unnamed TV actress, saying, "I'll catch a glimpse of her thigh and think, that sure looks tasty. But I don't feel like I actually want to eat it, as I accomplished the act of cannibalism once. There's no meaning to maintaining the desire for it anymore. In my book, I wrote that human flesh was tasty. But that was not really true. I'd much rather eat Matsuzaka Kobe beef. But because I desired to consume human flesh for so long, I'd managed to convince myself that it would necessarily be delicious." Issei Sagawa's disturbing story was even found its way into a Rolling Stones song, "Too Much Blood," with lyrics mentioning how he took the bones of his victim to the Bois de Boulogne. He is currently 73 years old and resides in Kawasaki City, Japan. To this day, no one knows why France did not allow Japan to give him a trial. We've explored a truly unsettling series of events that span decades and continents. As we conclude this spooky journey, it's a stark reminder that sometimes reality can be far more disturbing than any work of fiction. Thank you for delving into this unsettling narrative with us. And remember to stay curious, but always be mindful of the shadows that may lurk in the corners of our world.